Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, for KSL Sports. Never a dull moment in the world of BYU athletics, and Thursday was an example of that. Organizational restructure within the athletic department. What does it mean for BYU football? What does it mean for Brian Santiago and BYU athletics as a whole? Let's unpack all of it in our top story of the day.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Brigham Young University confirmed that there was an organizational restructure within the athletic department. So now, Brian Santiago, he remains the athletic director. However, he will no longer oversee the football program. The football program will report and be watched over, if you will, by advancement VP Keith Vorkink, who's been the advancement VP at Brigham Young University since 2020. And Brian Santiago will then oversee the remainder of the athletic department, which includes men's basketball, women's basketball, and so forth. Brigham Young University spokesperson Audrey Perry-Martin, who took over that lead communications role after Kerry Jenkins retired. Kerry Jenkins was a staple within BYU communications, Brigham Young University. Audrey Perry-Martin confirmed to KSL Sports the organizational restructuring within the athletic department and stated, today's organizational adjustments reflect BYU's commitment to invest in our student athletes and strengthen our world-class programs. Brian Santiago remains BYU's athletic director. We will continue adapting to the changing landscape of college athletics in a way that aligns with the university's mission, end quote. Interesting statement. Keith Vorkink also said to the Deseret News, BYU Athletics shares a common focus on helping our student athletes succeed, not just on the field, but also in the classroom and most importantly, in their Christian discipleship. Given today's dynamic athletic landscape, we feel it's important to be providing more administrative support, not less. We've made recent hires with that in mind, and we're also organizing in ways that we believe will support BYU's world-class programs. End quote. So I think the initial reaction to this move is that this comes on the heels of all the speculation regarding resources and maybe friction potentially between Kalani Sitake and Brian Santiago. And then this move happens, and it happens 9 days before the BYU football season, arguably the most anticipated season in BYU football history. It reminded me a little bit of 2004 when BYU football had a huge win over Notre Dame, and then the following Monday, they fire Val Hell, they fire Elaine Michaelis, two people that were just connected for life to BYU, moved on from him, fired him, right after beating Notre Dame in Provo. And I know at that point there were a lot of off-the-field scandals, and Gary Crowton was under fire, and it seemed like they removed the man that was maybe going to support Gary Crowton to clear the deck to go fire Crowton and just have a clean slate, basically. It's not quite to that level here. Again, a lot of positivity about this. Despite the positive messaging, it hasn't been celebrated on BYU's social media feeds or a news release. It's just been private statements from the university about this organizational restructure. Still, like anything with BYU, there's not much clarity when it comes to how this is going to proceed going forward. And there's still the big question, what is Mark Hill going to do, the deputy AD, in all of this? Is he going to oversee football? Is he going to take that role from Vorkink and just run with football going forward? I think, the knee-jerk reaction to this, too, I think people look and say, oh, massive win for Kalani. Massive win for Kalani. To me, I look at it and say this is maybe potentially creates a divide, and it can be a huge distraction for this football team in 2026. Again, one of the most anticipated seasons in program history, ranked number 14 in the preseason AP Top 25 poll. Only the second time in program history you enter a season in the top 15. And in the backdrop, there's always going to be this conversation about relationship between Kalani and Santiago. Football versus basketball is what people are creating. And it's just going to go on and on. And even Brett McMurphy, he quoted a source that he spoke to saying that it's just a Band-Aid and it's going to have to be basically pick Kalani Sitake or Brian Santiago going forward. I don't know if I look at this as a positive for Kalani Sitake, but what I will say is that if Kalani Sitake is not coaching at BYU as the head coach at BYU at any point in his career, that's a colossal failure by BYU. And you got to do right by Kalani Sitake. You just have to. It's not because of necessarily the wins. It's not because of all of that, even though he's put together a winning program at BYU. The culture piece has been significant, but it's just he embodies BYU. He's a positive ambassador for BYU football. And this is just going to be in the backdrop the whole time. And someone like Kalani, is he going to want to keep putting up with these type of questions and this speculation about this all the time? It's Brian Santiago. I mean, Brian's been entrenched in BYU now since 1997, 29 years. He just got hired as the AD just 15 months ago. I struggle to imagine he's going to want to leave. Kalani Sitake had options to go to Penn State. He could leave. And I'm sure this December in this coaching carousel coming up, I'm sure he'll have interest, regardless of what happens with BYU this season, because he's planted the seed of resources have been an issue. They've been tasked to do more with less, as he told Ben Criddle on Cougar Sports Media back at the Golf Classic in July. So he could point to that and say, oh, we went 8-4 because resources are an issue at that place. There's just not the alignment. And I think that's one of the big things that stands out here. So many coaches talk about successful organizations and championship culture. You got to have alignment. Is there alignment here? When I see a divide, sure, Arizona does this with Desiree Reed-Francois, basketball coach Tommy Lloyd, no longer reporting to her. Okay, it can work, sure. Is it alignment, though, in the entire president, athletic department, the whole deal? Doesn't feel like there's alignment, and that's concerning. What do you do if you're BYU when you have Big 12 AD meetings centered around football? Do you send Brian Santiago, who doesn't oversee BYU football, or are you sending advancement VP Keith Vorkink, or are you sending Mark Hill? Things like that become questions now about how do they handle this. Like, yes, the statement's fancy and it's great about world-class resources for the institution. Why didn't you do this? You had a national search in 2025. Why didn't you lay it out this way in May 2025? They said they had a national search. Why didn't you just structure it this way to begin with? Like, Brian Santiago is only 15 months into his tenure. And that first year was really good. Football was fantastic. I thought basketball, even though early exit was a 6th seed, solid. You know, the Olympic sports, some dips in some areas, some coaching changes, which have been kind of interesting. But the revenue generating sports, they're generating revenue. Selling out the venues, passionate fans, invested, they're all in. So it's a good year, good business. But what do you do now? Like, with those little things become storylines. Who do you send to these meetings? Again, is there alignment with this decision? It becomes a conversation nonstop. One thing I will take away from this, too, I just feel like there's now heightened expectations, even more for Kalani Sitake to deliver great results. And if he doesn't deliver the playoff or the Big 12 championship, is there internal rift? Is there hot seat? Like, it feels a little bit like the expectations got cranked up for him even more to deliver, which is very fascinating dynamic. But here's the thing to me, with Kalani Sitake being the right fit for BYU football, I think the perfect fit for BYU football, BYU's got to get out of the mindset. I'm not even talking about do more with less. We've beat that to a pulp. Stop with the prove it and then we invest. This is BYU football. This is a 50-year product for the last 5 decades, one of the 10 winningest programs in college football. no matter what, it's investing at a high level. That should be the standard. Because what we've learned about BYU in the last 2 years, they lose Mark Pope. He goes to Kentucky. And at that time when he left, initially you think, well, the dream hire is Kevin Young. However, he's an NBA guy. BYU's not going to pony up that level for a guy like him who would be outstanding. So maybe you go to the Chris Burgesses. Maybe you go to the Barrett Perrys, the Quincy Lewises, because this is BYU. They do more with less. Well, in short order, they get Kevin Young. And it was one of the quickest coaching searches ever. They got it done. Kalani Sitake, last December. Penn State comes calling. History would say, BYU, you probably can't contend with that. You can't contend with that. He's getting this amazing offer from Penn State. He's getting the world given to him from a blue blood. You can't compete with that. Might as well let him pack his bags and start planning for the next head coach. And probably that's going to be Jay Hill. And he's going to be cheaper and more affordable. Let's move forward. Well, then the church gets involved. And next thing you know, it gets done. And Kalani's happy with the deal. And it works. And then fast forward, we're seeing issues. But again, they have the ability to get it done. They have the ability to rewrite narratives about, oh, well, BYU always does more with less. Oh, you got to win, and then they'll throw in the money. No, just keep leveling it up. Keep investing at the highest levels, because this fan base is so rabid, and we always hear the secret sauce of BYU is Cougar Nation. And Cougar Nation's been filling the bill, getting told ticket prices going up. Still, I think compared to other places, still manageable, but Cougar Club donations go up to get their seats. It's not cheap. And then they see the stadium upgrades. It's not really for the everyday fan. It's for the corporate sponsor fan. Prices are expensive, but they want to still be a part of it because it is a deeply ingrained part of their lives to be BYU fans. So just keep leveling up with the resources. And I think it should be done for football and men's basketball. I don't think any Cougar fan's going to complain about continuing to level up and investing in the resources in these two programs. But it feels like now when you've got this kind of perceived divide, it's going to be a storyline where it's like, why is the AD not overseeing football? Now, do they have some great master plan to spin this thing off into something more and have different AD heads? But then that feels like more red tape. And that's been one of the knocks on BYU. In a fast-paced environment of college athletics, there's too much red tape. You don't want to create extra layers. To me, you give the power to Kalani Sitake in football. You give the power to Kevin Young in basketball. They're good dudes. Whatever they need, get it done for them. Make them completely happy. And if you do that, you're going to probably have these guys for a very long time. And Kalani Sitake especially, it's clear as day now. Your favorite coach's favorite coach, as ESPN put it. That's going to be a tagline forever. It's a great headline. He is a incredibly well-liked guy, and he will have probably programs that will clamor for him, and the whole country will give him a positive, glowing reference for any school looking into possibly hiring him. He feels like he's more attainable than ever before. And that's concerning because you thought that in December, this was done. He's here for life. And then there's this feeling of, I asked him earlier this week at fall camp, has the resources stuff been cleared up? He was stern. He was direct and just like, I'm not worrying about that. Moving on, focusing on the team. It just feels a little tense. And this move adds a little juice and a little bit of credibility, quite a bit of credibility to all the speculation that was going on social media that then led to a Cougar board statement from an athletic director, communications director, John McBride. It just feels like it adds validity to all of it. And through it all, there's just not much transparency about what's next. Student athletes succeed on the field, also in the classroom, Christian discipleship. That's great. We all know that's the BYU standards. Like, what is this going to lead to? Is this a good thing for the athletic department as a whole and for BYU football and for BYU men's basketball, but for BYU football, the biggest machine because football drives it all. BYU football is a big time thing. It is huge. They got a national championship in their history. They've got a Heisman Trophy winner. They've had a lot of success. They've had 23 wins the past 2 years. It's a big-time program. And next year, the tab will probably be even higher to retain the roster. You break it down, you think about the guys that could be retained. Kedu Luave. Like, in a perfect world, he's off to the NFL. But if he doesn't get the draft feedback that he wants to hear, he could run it back year 5. Same with LJ Martin. Could run it back for year 5. That's probably going to be expensive. Ryder Lyons coming back from a mission. Brock Harris coming back from a mission. You know, there's programs circling for those guys the moment they touch down at their respective airports near their hometowns. They're circling. They'd love those guys. And I'm sure they'd pay a pretty penny. And I think for BYU, it's important to have the alignment in the athletic department, the school, but also the church as well. They've got to know more than ever before on a day in, day out basis. And I know that's kind of crazy to say considering they got bigger fish to fry. The Brethren have much more important things of the world and the good of mankind than worrying simply about football and revenue share and rosters and resources and nutrition teams and strength staffs and facilities. But it's important. This thing makes a lot of money. BYU football does and BYU sports in general. So there's got to be complete alignment. But I just think to assume, it's Kalani's world and we're just now living in it. I don't necessarily know if I agree per se. I think it's kind of like, where is this going to go? Does this create some friction here? Because, and I will say too, with the resources bit, BYU has done a lot more than where they started in the Big 12. They want to win. And I think that's what's, where you'd hope that this can all get fixed. But, there's always been the speculation about promises and what was in that contract, what wasn't. And that's been a lot of speculation on that. Because I haven't seen the contract with my own 2 eyes. I haven't seen that specifically, but, Kalani Sitake, in his time at BYU, he's gone through a lot. We've talked about this on the show, but he's gone through a lot as the head coach. And this past December was the first real tangible moment where he had legitimate leverage. And how did he feel in that moment? Did that play a role in where we're at today with the relationships and the feeling of resources being delivered and promises being kept? Because that moment, was BYU just ready to move on to Jay Hill and let Kalani walk and exit the state college? And the idea of Kalani Sitake being anywhere but BYU just doesn't compute. Because again, beyond the wins and losses, Kalani's the right fit for BYU. No one was questioning, should Lavelle get fired when he had some mediocre seasons? It's Lavelle Edwards. And I'm not saying Kalani's to Lavelle's level yet, but I think he's on that career. He's on that path. Even Brian Santiago said as much at Big 12 Media Day. He said that there's some, comparisons maybe to Lavelle Edwards. And I agree. You could argue that maybe it's even more impressive in this era where it's ever changing and he's putting out winners. This decade, BYU football is winning at a high clip. Like, what else does he have to show at this point? Whether it's 7 wins this year or 12 or whatever it is, just keep pumping in the resource, because it's like, if you don't deliver the 12, 13-win season, do they scale back to the resources? He throws his hands up, says, what? I got to go because I'm not going to be able to retain this roster or keep these recruits. I got to bounce. No, you just keep the machine going. Texas Tech's not slowing down. They didn't say, we lost the playoff. We got to scale back a little bit. They're more motivated than ever. They want to get back there and taste it again. Like, BYU was in Arlington, and I think that motivated the retention piece this year. And you're not putting together big resources to retain this roster. Like, this roster was well resourced, but it's got to continue to always be committed. And I think it goes beyond just simply NIL too. But Kalani Sitake has not specifically said what exactly on the resources front is either missing or whatnot. He's just always focused, I got to take care of my players and make sure they're done right. But it's interesting times. and BYU athletics. Again, I think now my mind goes to, is Brian Santiago at football games? Is he on the sidelines at games? The last practice of fall camp, he was there on Tuesday. Saw him fall camp. He was there at practice, and that's always a common occurrence. Brian's always there. There was one practice during fall camp, media observation, where he wasn't, but he's always there. Will that continue with the football games? It just raises more questions. And in a year where you've got this highly anticipated season, it feels like an unnecessary distraction. Because I point to last year and last year's team, now they admit it. But last year going into the Big 12 championship, that was a huge distraction with the Kalani-Sitake negotiations. It was a huge distraction. And it sunk what should have been the biggest game in BYU football history, and no one seized the moment. No one seemed to understand how big that stage was. And you can't just ever assume you're always getting back. And they just dropped the ball. You hope that this sort of stuff doesn't derail that, because the statements and the wording is all nice and fine and dandy from the statements. Sure, it all sounds nice and it's all going to be great and everyone's going to be happy and the student athlete's going to be just thrilled. Okay, great. But, they were saying that same stuff going into the Big 12 championship, and then fast forward 4 months later and players like, yeah, that was a distraction. You hope that 4 months from now, they're not saying the same thing and going, yeah, that was a distraction. Because I think this could have the makings of that, or it creates a BYU football against the world mentality. I'm curious to see how this plays out and see what direction this goes. And I think a big question going forward is what they do with Mark Hill. Does Mark Hill just oversee football and he becomes the football guy, and then Brian Santiago is over basketball, and then Keith Vorkink communicates it all in that space? And Keith Vorkink has a long list of duties at BYU since he's been hired at 2020. Advancement VP. He's over BYU athletics, BYU broadcasting, university communications, alumni and external relations, and philanthropies. He was there that day when BYU got the invite to the Big 12 in September 2021, approaching 5 years now. He was there in the room at the old X building, and he was there to experience that. And he's seen this rise of BYU sports in the Big 12 era. And he's a sports guy himself, played basketball at Snow College. He's an athletic guy, sports-minded guy. I think he's a big fan too. So I'll be curious to see if this can all get everyone on the same page and all aligned. But just to assume, yep, it's Kalani's world, we're just living it. I don't know if I necessarily see that at this point, depending to see where it goes moving forward. But my biggest takeaway from all this talk about resources, I feel like December, it's coaching carousel watch again, potentially for Kalani-Sitake. That's how I look at it. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I look, is that we could be having a conversation about the coaching carousel once again for Kalani-Sitake. And I think on the basketball side, again, you want to maintain Kevin Young too. You've got the two perfect coaches for BYU sports to, I think, lead them to greatness. I really believe that. Kevin Young and Kalani-Sitake are the perfect coaches for BYU. And if you're Kevin Young, you're like, I often ask myself, how much does Kevin Young like college basketball? Because I got to think it's just frustrating as all get out. This roster build, all the confusion with the rules. What do you get? What do you not get? And then you got some in-house drama too. Does someone like Kevin Young say, this isn't worth it, man? I need to go back to the NBA immediately. So what if I'm in Cleveland and I'll back-to-back on an East Coast roadie in January? Get me out of here. You just hope that doesn't happen, because you don't want to lose both of them. And just let's get it all on the same page here if you're BYU, because, again, you got the right guys. Look, you can always get coaches. BYU has shown that despite its small coaching pool, they always get good head coaches. Look at football. I mean, Kalani-Sitake, Bronco Mendenhall, Gary Crone had a 12-win season. Lavelle Edwards, say less. BYU basketball, Dave Rose, Mark Pope, Kevin Young, Steve Cleveland, Roger Reed. I mean, I could just go on and on. They always get good coaches. So it's like, yeah, sure. If you lost a guy, you're always going to get a good coach. And BYU football would probably have, Jay Hill or Kellen Moore could be in the mix if that doesn't work out in the NFL. There's always guys. Like, I'm always keeping tabs of who maybe the next things are potentially. If an opening comes up, you got to do that. But at the same time, when you've got perfect, don't mess with perfect, because the grass isn't always greener. And when someone like Kalani Sitake said, I get along with everyone. Just take care of my football team. Like, it felt like, I get along with everyone. How's my relationship with everyone? It felt like that's on you if you can't get along with me, when he was asked about his relationship with Brian Santiago. At the same time, I think that BYU Athletics looks and feels like, hey, we're doing unprecedented resources here. We're committing at an incredibly high level. There's got to be some lost in translation. That's why they got to get all on the same page, and I just don't feel like this brings it all together on the same page. That's where I feel like on the surface, you look at like there's a divide. And how do you fix this? And that's going to be the big question for someone like Advancement VP Keith Vorkink and President Shane Reese. Make sure this is all on the same page. But I think at the end of the day, you got to take care of Kalani Sitake. Because I think Cougar Nation would revolt. I think they would melt down if Kalani Sitake is not taken care of. You thought the love bomb thing was big. I mean, national media will say, oh, the Crumble guy saved Kalani Sitake and kept him at BYU. Crumble was part of it. But, I think big role was Cougar Nation. The church getting involved, of course, too. Getting it set up to take care of Kalani. Making sure he's squared away. But clearly, fast forward 8 months, it feels like there's a little bit of drama, feels like. But we'll see. This is in the backdrop now of what's, again, a highly anticipated season. We'll probably hear, I'm assuming, from Kalani Sitake on Monday. That's usually when his Monday press conference is, and those typically take place on Zoom. Haven't heard any announcement yet as to how that's going to be handled this year. We won't have any, post-practice availability with him anymore this season. But that's probably now going to command the conversation for week one game week, is this structuring in the athletic department. So we'll see where it goes from here. But hopefully, let's just say, too, as we wrap it up, let's get some football. Let's get some football. But behind the scenes, I think this stuff's got to be squared away and taken care of, because I think for BYU sports right now, these are good times. Football and men's basketball, keep the good times rolling. Get everyone on the same page. Get this thing moving in the right direction. And if you got to cut things, cut outside stuff within the athletic department. Don't be messing with Kalani Sitake and Kevin Young. Those are the guys you got to keep. Those are the guys you got to make happy and keep them happy at all costs. And really, they call the shots to me. If I was in charge of it all, I'd say, what do you guys need? We'll find a way. In the words of Brian Santiago, we will find a way, and we will get you taken care of. Because whatever you need, we're getting it done. Because we got to keep you happy. And I just think that keep these good times rolling and don't let whatever differences you got derail what could be some promising years for BYU athletics for both football and men's basketball going forward. That's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast, and I'll talk to you tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports.